Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Michelle, how are you this afternoon?
I'm great. How are you, Ted?
I'm doing good, and I just realized my mic was not where it needed to be. That probably sounds a lot better. Hopefully.
It does.
Good. So I found your article. You had an article on particularly the chief innovation officer role within law firms. And there was a fantastic article by Mark Cohen called The Enigma of Big Law Innovation or something along those lines. And he had a link to your article in there. And I found it and was just fascinated, dove in deep, and knew I had to reach out to get you on the podcast here because this is Legal Innovation Spotlight. We talk a lot about the CINO role and all of what's happening and what's not happening in legal innovation. So I looked at your background, and yeah, so you're currently a law professor at University of Miami, guest faculty at Harvard Law School. I actually bought your book, Legal Upheaval. And actually, no, I bought Leader Upheaval, right? Which is the second installment.
Yep.
Correct. And I'm just maybe 75 pages in, so still have some reading to do. I read at night, and it takes me forever because I fall asleep. But
so I put you to sleep?
Yeah. It's not just you. Just reading in general puts me to sleep. So the book is very good so far. I've enjoyed it. But most interestingly about your background is you've interviewed a bunch of GCs, law firm partners, and heads of innovation, and I can't wait to dig in. So I covered a lot of your background there, but maybe fill in any gaps for us and what you're working on these days.
Sure. So I'm the founder of Law Without Walls. And through that, as well as through my own consultancy, Move Law, over the last decade, I've led over 235 multidisciplinary teams with lawyers on them on a 4-month innovation journey. And each team's charge is to solve a business of law problem. And I ran an internal program at Microsoft for 5 years, and I also did a program last year for DXC. And so in doing that and running these innovation journeys with law firms, I've done it as well, and in-house legal departments, I've learned a lot about what is innovation and what is not innovation. And I've learned a lot about leading innovation because, as you can imagine, in leading that many teams, you've made a lot of mistakes, and that would be me. So my book is based not just on the interviews of general counsels and heads of innovation, but also on my own experience in leading teams and learning what it takes to actually lead innovation in today's marketplace.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine as a law firm innovation leader, it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of leadership skills. There's so much work to be done there. I've been in the space since 2008. We started as a consulting company, fell down the legal rabbit hole very early on, and very quickly aligned to the knowledge management. Innovation didn't even exist 17 years ago. And it's an area that I've been very fascinated in. Our buyers, so we have a legal intranet, extranet platform. Our buyers typically sit in KM and innovation. So yeah, it's something that I talk about a lot. Obviously, the podcast is named after it. I present on the topic a lot, and I have some perspectives on it that I think are somewhat unique. So over those 17 years, we have worked with over 110 AM law firms. So a pretty wide cross-sectional view within what happens in KM departments and innovation departments in big law, and it's all over the board. And innovation, from my perspective, really started to be a thing about 10 years ago. And I published a little mini infographic where I went back and looked at the ILTA roster from 2014, and I found all the roles that had the word innovation in the title. And there were 16 of them in 2014. There wasn't one C-suite. And then in 2024, 10 years later, there were over 300. There's like 360 now. So 2,000% growth, roughly. And I found a really interesting data point from last December. The Blickstein Group does it's called LDO, Law Department Operations Survey. You may have seen where they talk to 80 big company GCs. And one of the questions they asked was, is your law firm innovative? And 63% either disagreed or strongly disagreed. So we have this contrast. We have 2,000% growth in the innovation function and almost 2/3 of law firm clients who don't think that their law firms are innovative. And that is a huge disconnect in my mind. What is your take on that?
Well, like you, I started studying this early on. And the first time I became aware of the Chief Innovation Officer role was in 2015, so 10 years ago. And I guess my take on that is twofold. One, I think law firms do what their clients push them to do. And so part of the reason why there's a disconnect or dissatisfaction is I don't think the general counsels have pushed hard enough to make the law firms innovate. I think that's changing because of generative AI, and people are really seeing what innovation can do in terms of saving time. That's number one. I don't think they've pushed hard enough. Number two, like I mentioned in my article on chief innovation officers, there's some gaps. I don't think that the competency is there for some of them. You can't just miraculously learn how to innovate. You can't just go like, okay, I'll give you that title. You're smart, you're persuasive. I think a lot of lawyers, including myself, think I can do that. And I think there's more to innovation than just creating a new tool. It's you need to understand marketing, design thinking, project management, people skills. You need to know how to lead and follow. And I think that, look, the law firms were really well intentioned in trying to drive innovation and in creating this role, but they weren't so great at the execution. So I guess that's what I think for why we're seeing that gap.
So I did a little interesting analysis earlier in the week. I was on a flight to Texas, and I downloaded a podcast with Mark Andreessen and Andrew Huberman, who I'm a big fan of. His podcasts are way too long, but it's great content. They're like 3 hours long. It's ridiculous. But in this podcast, Mark Andreessen, who founder of Netscape, he's the general partner at Andreessen Horowitz. This guy knows has invested billions in innovative tech companies. He knows what innovation looks like. He listed out multiple characteristics of what a true innovator looks like. So I took that and then mapped it against Dr. Larry Richard's personality traits from Lawyer Brain. It's not the same. There's not good alignment there. And it's not a knock on lawyers. Like, they're some of the smartest, hardest working people I know, right? It's just a lot of the traits that make you good at practicing law aren't necessarily the same traits that make you think outside the box. And the post will be out, I'm sure, by the time this podcast airs. But a risk orientation. So of these 7 categories that Mark Andreessen laid out, he essentially said you got to be a 5 out of 5 on these. Risk orientation, 5 out of 5. Lawyers, 1 out of 5. And this is, using the way Dr. Richard frames it up, it's like a percentile based on the general population. So this is rough estimates here, but probably pretty well aligned. Outlook, innovator, optimism, 5 out of 5. Lawyer, skepticism. So they're 1 out of 5 on that. Time focus, innovators, future. Lawyers, the law is based on precedent and past. 1 out of 5. Comfort with ambiguity. Innovators, high. Lawyers, low. Resilience to setbacks. Action style velocity. relationship to status quo. If you look at this, it's not good alignment. So does that mean that every lawyer is not innovative? Absolutely not. But if you really are taking the general population and mapping out personality traits, it doesn't align well to this. It's a different type of skill. So, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, now that we have, NLO, like, non-legal ownership rules changing in certain states. Are we going to see maybe people, non-lawyers on executive committees and having more influence within big law? How do you see this playing out?
So it's interesting because I've been quoting Dr. Larry Richards for years, and I talk about the same thing in my book. And I also compare lawyers to Clayton Christensen's book on the 5 DNA of an innovator, observing, networking, um, experimenting, questioning, and associating things that wouldn't otherwise be associated. And it's the same thing. Like, yeah, we know how to question, but we don't question the way innovators do. We question like we're looking for material evidence, right? So I see that, and I totally agree. And the reason why I started Law Without Walls in 2011 was to fill that gap, because I believe that lawyers need the skills they have to be really good at their job. They need to be a little combative. They need to be a little bit risk averse. They need to be strategic. They also need to be creative and inclusive and collaborative. And so I, as a professor, that's my job. That's what motivates me. I'm motivated to try to change the way lawyers think about the world, the way they see the world, and most importantly, the way they behave. And I'm doing it one lawyer at a time, but I always say this, like also Larry Richards talks about how lawyers test really, really low on empathy. We don't just test low compared to other professions. We're off the charts low. Hey, so are tax accountants and insurance agents. So we're not alone there. But I think to myself as a professor, like, did you all come here with a bunch of empathy and I just squeezed it all out of you? Or are people that have the skill sets of lawyers more prone to go to law school? I don't know. And right now we're seeing a big growth in people applying to law school, so maybe that will change. Also in 2011, I wrote an article about not the importance of non-lawyers influencing lawyers. Because if we miss that skill set, that's exactly how you can add value for your clients, is work with people that aren't lawyers so that you're filling that gap, maybe that's on your team of lawyers, with the business professionals. And I think we're already seeing it, Ted. I don't think it's whether or not we have more ABSs. I think we're already seeing more and more business people having impact and having a seat at the table in legal departments and in law firms than we ever have before. So I think one of the problems that the chief innovation officer role has struggled with is they took lawyers and gave them that title. Some lawyers can do it. I believe that. A lot of lawyers think they can do it, but like you said, don't have the skill set or the mindset to do it. So my hope is that more and more business people will be hired and be part of law firms and these new structures that might help open it up. Like if KPMG is successful, yeah, I think so. I think it's necessary. And I always tell law firms, if you want to differentiate and you want to make a difference, hire more business professionals, learn how to market and sales and all those things that you think you were above, you're no longer above now that AI is there.
Yeah, the question I have for you is, I agree with you that we're already starting to see it, but are they sufficiently empowered? Do they have the...
Yeah, not yet. And there's an attitude problem. I mean, so years ago, at 25, 30 years ago, there was general counsels were considered second-class citizens. It took decades for them to get a seat at the table. I think it's going to take a long time because for some reason, there's a second-class citizen attitude towards the business professionals. And so you see more success for people like Kevin Doolin, who used to work at Eversheds, and he was a partner there. Then he went and got a business degree and then ended up being head of marketing. Or Michael Hertz, same thing at White & Case, who's now retiring, but he was a partner before he became head of BD and marketing and innovation. And so he's got the street cred of really understanding what lawyers do. And I would say this, it's not just lawyers treating the business professionals like second-class citizens. A lot of the business professionals need to up their game. They come in and they don't actually study what lawyers do, and then they don't realize what lawyers do and how they do it. So it's kind of a combo. I don't think we can blame it all on the lawyers. I think some of the business professionals haven't done their homework. And I think the reason why the lawyer turned business professional has the street cred and has a little bit more ability to make things happen is because they really understand their client, which is the lawyer.
Yeah. Well, and you said it's going to take some time. I guess my question back to you would be, do we have time? Because I honestly see KPMG coming in. They are 40 billion in revenue. They have 275,000 employees. They have 4,000 lawyers. They'd be AmLaw 10, right? If they were a law firm. And they're coming in with a massive global footprint, with relationships all up and down the Fortune 500. They have extensive digital transformation capabilities, legions of Lean Six Sigma black belts. They are very well positioned to capitalize on this new transformation of tech-enabled legal services, much better than any law firm by a huge stretch. I mean, to put it in perspective, so KPMG is the smallest of the big four, right? The biggest law firm is K&E at 7.2 billion. They're almost 6 times Kirkland and Ellis's size. So they're going to come into the marketplace, and this is going to be more of an evolution than a revolution. I think that they're going to take a lot of that blocking and tackling ALSP type work, and they're going to make magic happen with AI.
Well, look, they've all along been much better at giving, full service, not just, they can do everything now. They can do law, they can do accounting, they can do business, they can do marketing, they can do it all. And the people that work there, as long as they hire the right lawyers, right? Like if they're only, it depends on how they run their departments and how they train the lawyers that work in KPMG, because you don't just get different output if you have the same input just because you're a part of a really big conglomerate. And we've seen that from some of the big four. Some of the big four's legal areas are being run like little law firms and therefore experiencing the same problems that law firms do. Do I think they can that an accounting firm like a KPMG can figure it out? I know I shouldn't call them an accounting firm because there's so much more than that. But do I think they can figure it out? Yeah. Do I think their size helps them? Yeah. Do I think it hurts them and may also hurt them? Yes. So it depends on how well they are at getting lawyers to play in the sandbox and really leverage their way of doing business consulting and advising. If they do that, I agree. And, they say, oh, we're not going to touch this or that. We're only going to, we're not touching M&A. We're only going to touch these things. Okay, right now, right?
Exactly.
You're just touching the sugar and the flour, but eventually you're going after the cake, okay? Everyone knows that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's going to be an incremental step. The bet the company matters are going to big law. I mean, that's not going to change anytime soon. And I'm not Chicken Little. I don't think the sky is falling in big law. I just think there is going to be a massive shakeup. And I think some firms, I'm going to take a even further step. I am certain that there are firms in the AmLaw 200 that aren't going to be able to make this jump. And how I know is because I see it every day. I see the hesitation. I see the slow movement towards the technology adoption. It's like a deer in the headlights at some of these firms. And there are plenty of other firms that are moving fast and investing big and really doubling down. And it's really there's two different scenarios here. I don't see a lot in the middle. I see folks moving fast and I see folks moving real slow. But when I think about some of the more innovative approaches to business, like I use this example at a presentation in Chicago at an Inside Practice event. Andreessen talked about something called the Wild Ducks at IBM, and it was a group of 8 executives that reported directly to Watson was his last name, the CEO in the 80s and 90s. And they had carte blanche access to pull people off of teams. They had a blank check to do whatever and innovate within the organization. And there was one of these wild ducks executives, in particular, Andy Heller, who they talked about wore jeans and cowboy boots into meetings and put his feet on the desk. And this is in the 80s, with IBM and suit and ties. And I think about how that would play out in a law firm. I'm like, man, I can't see that approach happening in big law today. So I don't know. What's your take on their ability to think outside the box with stuff like that?
Well, when you look at historical successes in innovation, even like there's stories of Mattel and IBM and Microsoft, that's exactly what you do. You pull a small group apart, you put them in a different location, you give them different rules, no rules. They dress different, behave different tools. They're out there finding their crayons, and they have license to do what they want and the money to make it happen. And that is how you get innovation. And in fact, I think the little group that developed that digital whatever and Kodak let them go, right? You hear stories about that. Well, at a law firm, the problem with the structure is how do you ever you can't really give that power to a group. I guess if the managing partner had the confidence and the support of the lawyers and said, I'm going to do this, I think there are probably a few special firms where you could do it. But it would be a special person that's the managing partner that everybody believes in, right? That is a leader and a follower and can inspire and people trust. And then you put this group on the side. But I don't think you can get a whole group of partners to do something. And the problem I always see with law firms trying to innovate, or even just a committee, is number one, there's too many people on the committee. They don't have a shared purpose. It's the biggest problem. If everybody wrote down, what are we doing? And why are we doing it? And when are we going to measure it? And why does it matter? Those 4 questions or 3 questions, it would all be different. And then you can't get anything done. And that's a huge problem at law firms. And no one's willing to take on sub roles and let other people have the power. And no one's project managing this stuff. So in the right firm with the right culture and the right leader and the willingness to pull people out and let them go rogue. The other thing law firms do too, historically, lawyers, look, the way innovation happens is you go after the eager beavers. You go after the early adopters first, the people that want it. And instead, lawyers do the opposite. Oh, no, we better go talk to, Mark, because he's no guy. And until we convince him, nothing's going to happen. No, go after the 25% that believe and then get the next 25%. But instead, for some reason, I guess because we're combative and believe that we go after the one naysayer. No, make them busy doing something else. Don't even tell them you're doing this. But that isn't usually how it's approached.
Yeah. So I actually see quite a few headwinds in the law firm model to innovation, and I'm not exactly sure the path through it. I mapped these out recently, and I think one of the biggest headwinds is the partnership model itself. And for all the reasons that you just mentioned, it is anti-innovative. And the big four, they're partnerships as well. And they're suffering right now in certain areas. I just heard about E&Y laying off partners in the UK, which doesn't happen frequently. But you have consensus-driven decision making, which creates friction and slows rates of change. You have lateral mobility to the nth degree in legal, where a lawyer can pick up his book of business and move down the street, and that inhibits long-term investment. You have healthy profit margins that make the status quo sticky. You have cash basis accounting and retirement horizons that also affect capital investment. You have law schools that aren't keeping pace. I saw an ABA stat from, I think, December that like 55% of law schools have a Gen AI class. 55%. Like, how is that not 95% at this point? Empowering non-lawyers, business professionals is a challenge. Risk aversion, lack of diversity within leadership ranks. All of these are massive headwinds to innovation, and we got to figure them out if we're going to be successful, I think.
That list was long, right? So we go back to your original point about the study. Why is there a difference between, what general counsels want and what they think they're getting? You just justified that with that list. It's a lot. And so you know what it makes you feel like doing? I bet if you're a lawyer is why bother?
Yeah.
It's exhausting. I'm exhausted just hearing that list. I mean, the last thing in the world I'd want to do is be a managing partner of a law firm right now.
Do you agree with that list, or is there anything that you would take issue with?
No, I totally agree with the list.
Yeah.
And I think your point about education is going to get even worse. And law schools never really prepared lawyers to be lawyers at law firms and or business work collaboratively with the right mindset and skill set. Law Without Walls back in 2011 was the first of its kind to even say, like, no, we should be teaching our students design thinking and how to be creative and how to actually be humble and self-aware and collaborative. But and I think it's going to get worse because the schools that survive aren't going to have to. And I think this training gap is going to get worse as well because with AI, the how you do things matters so much more than what you do. So the kid in school that got a C in law school, he's caught up now with that tool or she. And now how you deliver that service is more important than what you deliver, how you use the tool. And the problem right now is, like, if you think about a contract that you would ask a junior associate to go through, and that's how they would learn, it would take them 10 hours and some back and forth to identify, the client wants this, but the other side said this, and which provisions should we give on, which ones matter. A senior associate can put it through a tool and in a half hour do what took 10 hours, and now we have no training. So we just ran this seminar. We just had, we have a fellow, an AI fellow, or Sasson is amazing. And he and a former general counsel, Lynn Cherry, put together this conference on AI, and we had the students be in teams and take a scenario in a contract and use the tool. And we had an answer key for what they were supposed to come up with. Well, yeah, most of them came up with 80% of the right issues, 80% of the issues that were supposed to be come up with. But they all came out with 200% more that just were bogus. And they don't have they're 1Ls and 2Ls. They can't be expected to understand that doesn't matter. But and this tool was not a contract trained tool, right? It was just one of I don't remember which one we used, whether it was Copilot or whatever. But this is a problem because I don't know who's going to train these associates.
Yeah, and who's going to pay for it? Like, clients have subsidized new associate training through the process that you just mentioned. And now, not only how are we going to train new lawyers, what's going to happen to law firm leverage?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a big question mark in my mind. If that's been the profit engine for law firms, and it's going to get reduced at a minimum if we need fewer junior lawyers working on matters. I don't know how this all plays out.
Plus, this year, supposedly, at least in the U.S., we have more people applying to law school, and if presumably there's going to be less jobs in the next 3 years, this is a problem.
Yeah, that is an interesting data point to think about. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about innovation theater, which is something that I talk a lot about. I think that in big law, in some firms, certainly not all, I won't even say most, but in some firms, there has been a reactive dynamic to the CINO role. Like, hey, the firm down the street has a chief innovation officer. We need a chief innovation officer. And they slap the title on somebody's role and then don't, give them the resources they need. In fact, I told a story at Inside Practice. A dear friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, is a director of innovation at about a 300-400 attorney law firm. I think they're just in the AmLaw rankings. And we were working on a project together, and I couldn't get a hold of her for like a month. And I sent her a text message, and I was like, where have you been? She's like, oh, I've been working on DMS upgrade. Like, DMS upgrade? It was like, your innovation isn't IT working on it. She's like, I am IT, and I am innovation, and I am KM. And it's just like, okay, whoever put that title on your org chart did not give you the people, the resources to really innovate. Anybody who thinks DMS upgrades is innovation is wrong. And there's still a lot of that going on. I'm hoping we're going to cycle through that, and people are going to start taking it more seriously.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head because it's a tripartite. Is that the word? Tripartite? Yes, whatever. It's a three-part problem, and it is related to tech and what tech departments are supposed to be doing, because they still think they're supposed to be making sure your computers run. And I don't, there's a lot of tech dead weight in law firms. No offense to the tech people out there. There's some great tech people, but law firms, I don't think have revamped their tech departments. And I don't think the tech people have revamped themselves the way they need to. Then knowledge management, same thing. We've got knowledge management departments and law firms that have been around for 20 years, 15 years. And what they did originally was innovative, but it was manual. And now some of them are still doing it that way. And they've got too many tools and they're doing too many things without any ROI. And they've got too many like things that they're supposed to be in charge of. Like, well, we're supposed to give the knowledge to the lawyers. No, we're supposed to create stuff that we can sell to clients. Like it's all over the map. And then you've got this head of innovation floating around, not to mention then maybe it's a four-part, then legal ops. And I think that the firms that have clearly defined roles and have revamped those are doing better than the ones that have the old dead weight of the tech department the way they always did. Then we slapped on a CINO role on top of the knowledge. It's like a mess.
Yeah, I was trying to pull your paper up. You had where is it here? There it is. So the name of your paper, for those that want to take a look, and we can include a link in the show notes, is the law firm chief innovation officer, goals, roles, and holes. And I thought it was excellent. And so you interviewed a bunch of folks in the seat. It's been a while now. I think this is like 18, 19 time frame. But the first goal that you listed under your goals section was differentiate the law firm. And you quoted from some of your interviews where it's just like, yeah, there's a big marketing component to this, and not necessarily a really strong commitment to change. Do you feel like that is shifting now, and there's more of a commitment today than there was when you did this, wrote this paper?
I think there's more of a commitment. I'm not so sure that there's more of a commitment to the chief innovation officer role. It's a little bit, I feel like what's happening, and I'm not sure, but I feel like what's happening is a little bit about like what happened with compliance. So I did a kind of research into compliance officers. For a long time, compliance reported into legal. And then there was also the thinking that no, they should be separate. But if they're separate, then it isn't everybody's responsibility to be compliant. Oh, that's the compliance department's problem. So on the one hand, while having a chief innovation officer was a great thing to put in your RFP answer, because the clients want to hear, what have you done? Oh, well, we made Joe a chief innovation officer. We're not going to give him any extra money, but 10% of his time is supposed to go to that. And you're like, wait, how is that going to work if he gets paid by the hour? You're not giving him any more money, but 10% of his time now he needs to cut back, so he's going to make less money and do more. Like, this is wrong, right? So it's not supported. But they could put this in this RFP that, oh, we're innovative. And the thing back then too, and still it happens now, is clients don't go back and say, show me what you did that you said you were going to do in your RFP. So they let them off the hook, right? But also I think some firms are thinking, well, we don't want a chief innovation officer because innovation should be everybody's job. Okay, but if you do that, then is it nobody's job? So I think it's a chief innovation officer without power and a team isn't going to do anything, but make sure everyone else thinks they don't have to do anything.
It's a really good point. So I spent 10 years in risk management and corporate audit at Bank of America, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. We had 4 lines of defense. You had in risk management, you had the line of business. So this could be like the consumer bank, the control environment they have in place when you come in and make a deposit to make sure it isn't anti or money laundering activity, for example. Then you have your risk and compliance partners who are one level removed, but partner closely with the line of business to make sure these activities are taking place and effectively. The third line of defense is corporate audit. So internal audit comes in and evaluates the control environment and rights issues if they need to. The fourth line of defense is the Wall Street Journal. So that's where you end up if the first three fail. And it's true that it has to, this mindset, whether it's risk management or it's innovation, it has to be embedded in the culture of the organization itself. It's not a department, right? You can have a department that helps foster or creates a center of excellence around a particular activity, but it can't be isolated. And that's one of the biggest gaps I see today. And when I saw it is the cultural gap in big law. It's not, innovation is not part of big law culture today for the most part. And I know there are exceptions to that. I'm using broad brushstrokes here. And I see people, again, KPMG entering the market, it is part of their DNA and their culture. And I'm wondering how this is going to play out, is because culture is hard to change. I don't know. You got any thoughts on that?
I agree. It's hard to change. I think that at least the law firms that sponsor teams in Law Without Walls, they bring their clients and they do a 3-day hackathon with us, with the students, in order to, I think they get it. The ones that are willing to take risks, take their clients on new things. But even the firms that aren't, I think it is cultural. And the thing is that with firms that are so big, it's really hard. Like, one of my favorite questions to ask when I do my interviews is, like, before I do a law firm retreat, which I speak at all the time, I'll say, well, I want to talk to like 10 or 12 lawyers to get an understanding of the culture of the firm, blah, 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 blah. Okay. One of my favorite questions is, if you were to personify the firm and put the firm on a lunch date, and you were going to set me up with your firm, what 3 adjectives would you use to describe the firm?
Well, that's good.
It's good, but what I get most of the time is collegial, which I'm like, I don't want to go out with them. But anyway, the problem most of them say is, well, that's really hard because, we really vary by practice group. And I get that, right? Because each practice group is going to have their own culture, and that makes sense. I would be really curious to see if that's true with like a KPMG.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting how law firms have not been able to scale. So the biggest law firm is K&E. They wouldn't even qualify to be in the Fortune 500 if they were public, which they're not. It's about 7.6 billion is the floor of the Fortune 500. They're like 7.3. So they're close, but K&E is an outlier. The average revenue at a AmLaw 100 firm is 1.4 billion. There is the entire AmLaw 100, if you add up the revenue, is 140 billion. So 100 firms, 140 billion, 4 in accounting and advisory, tax, that are 220 billion. So that's how fragmented law, and that's the AmLaw 100. You've got another 100 on the AmLaw list. So it's very fragmented. And I think a lot of it is the bespoke nature of legal work that historically has been the case. It's exactly what you're talking about, where, different cultural norms within practice areas. It's the lateral movement where, entire practice areas sometimes pick up sticks and move to other law firms. It's really hard to build scale when you have all of that in play. So that's why, as I'm kind of mapping out what the future might look like, I think it looks like consolidation with the firms who actually figure out how to do this, gobbling up the ones that don't. That's the best guess I can put forward. And I'm not going to pretend to know, but I don't know. What do you see the future looking like?
Well, I guess I would agree with you, except that what gives me pause is the firms that I've worked with after they've merged. When two big firms, it's really tough. It's rare that a merger seems super successful. Inside, it still feels like an us versus them. You got the group that are we're still calling ourselves this, despite the new name, and that mergers haven't been the most successful thing. And what you're talking about is huge. And if if humility is not a real top skill for lawyers, that's really going to be hard to be gobbled up and be okay with it.
Yeah, and you're 1,000% correct. That's been my anecdotal observation as well. Is mergers have had mixed results, but you know what? One observation that I've had is a lot of mergers have taken two underperforming law firms and put them together. There's been a lot of that. Again, from the outside looking in, it hasn't always been
David Goliath.
more. Yeah, yeah, it's been two flailing, underperforming firms, and again, that is not true across the board at all. But I've seen a lot of that over the years, and yeah, and you're right. And the cultures are so different, and the power dynamics in law firms is a little bit unique. Like even though the big four are partnerships, they don't behave like there's not nearly the friction in decision making, because in those 10 years at B of A, we worked closely with all the big four, and those outside the big four that are partnerships, like the Accentures of the world. They operate like an enterprise, and decision making happens differently. It's not nearly, you don't have people. Maybe you do, but it's much less impactful. I see with law firms and executive committees with retirement horizons, like, you've got the senior most folks in the law firm that are leading and making the decisions, and they got there because they're the best at lawyering, right? That doesn't necessarily mean you're the best leader or you have the best vision or even that you can execute the best. It just means you're the best at lawyering. And the demographic, I pulled some stats on this not too long ago. If I remember correctly, 50% of law firm executive committees are 55 and older. Maybe, yeah. And I was actually surprised it wasn't higher. I was like, when I see the demographics, it seems older. So I'll have to go back and pull that up. But yeah, I think that, who really gets Gen AI? Millennials.
Yeah.
There was a McKinsey study that came out that I quoted, and they by a mile, it's that 35 to 44 age group, which is crazy to think that millennials are 44 now, but I guess that's right. 81, I guess. But who's not on executive committees at law firms? Millennials. There's just not a lot that I've seen, and if you look at the data, it skews a lot older. So I don't know, man. I think we need some diversity of thought in the boardroom at law
Yeah,
firms that's not there today. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. Totally. I mean, we also need a different compensation structure. Uh, that that's a big driver. I mean, if you compensate based on just the billable hour and you continue to give credit to some old law firm partner that's no longer doing the work, that's a big disincentive to do anything. And if you don't compensate innovation or doing something else, the the hope is, right, that generative AI is going to free up time so that lawyers will have the time. Because what I've found is, for example, with a couple firms I've worked with and running these 3 to 4 month innovation journeys, it's the innovation committee, but it's the last thing they want to do because they don't get credit for it. They don't get paid for it. And it takes away from what they consider their real job. And I guess what I hope for is a mindset change. Now that we have AI, your part of your job is innovating and using that extra time to find ways to add different and more value to your clients that you can charge for in a different way. That's the goal, right? And like the goal should be that your client comes to you and wants to give you all this information that's going to help you deliver something that on a go forward is going to help you be a better lawyer for them and for your other clients that right now they would never give to you because you would actually charge them by the hour to read it. And so I don't know. I mean, I have so much hope. We've been hoping for a change to the billable hour model and for so long that I'm scared to hope that. I feel like I'm not being realistic.
Yeah, it's been, I did a little digging on that too. It's been around since I think the late 40s, but it didn't really get traction until the 70s. And so it's been 50 plus years that it's been firmly entrenched. And, again, the profit margins at these law firms make it really, the status quo really sticky. So, yeah, what do you see? And I know we're running out of time here, but I'm just curious on how you see AI influencing like those cornerstones of legal services, like law firms, like again, the billable hour, the partnership model, how we pay, internal firm compensation model, client engagement model. Like, I don't know. Do you got any thoughts on how AI is it going to be able to move these massive boulders that have been stuck in place for so long?
So on the one hand, you're going to have some lawyers, like a friend of mine who's a very successful female partner at a very big firm in real estate. She says, "Well, this is just going to give me more time to have more clients." So, because she has so many clients that she turns away, and her team's too small, and it's so far hard to find the right talent, and she just there's only one of her, and so what AI is going to enable is that like almost more of her. And so in her mind, she didn't want to change anything. This just means I'm going to keep going with the billable hour. I could just do 8 clients instead of one. And so I'll still make money, if not more. And it's different. Whereas you have the other side of it where you think, no, instead, I'm going to think, I used this, what this used to take me 10 hours to do. Now it's taking me an hour to do. Instead of thinking, now I can do 9 more of those, instead think, how do I charge differently for that hour, and what can I do, what wrappings can I put around it to add value so that I'm giving some type of extra value to my client that they're willing to pay for, whether that's say, okay, I did this contract analysis, but because you gave me the past 10 years, I can predict for the future that this and this, and let's build something together so that the next time, and you pay me a flat rate, not an hourly rate, and that flat rate should presumably be more than the hour it took you to do the work and more than the hours it took you to create the overlay, but not the 10 worth, not maybe the same as the 10. And then the third view I have is maybe what everyone's just going to do is start pricing things based on how much it would have cost before. Because now we have AI, so all the firms can go back and figure out everything they did, how long on average it took them to do it, and then they can just do an AFA based on that. But that's not really a different business model. That's just back ending what a billable hour would have been to come up with a fee.
Yeah, it's a good point. I know there's not a lot of easy answers around the pricing structure here. I've heard a lot of like an AI multiple, essentially where they just charge a different hourly rate when AI is in the mix. I I don't know. I definitely don't have.
Why does everyone assume that it should be cheaper? AI is helping you, so you're better.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I was thinking, whatever it is, it would be north of 1, whatever that coefficient is, right? Like, because law firms have to somehow account for the cost of the infrastructure, right? Harvey co-counsel, they're not free, far from it. Somebody's got to pay for that in addition to the revenue decrease that the law firms are. Yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to play out. There was a story I heard. This is like an old fable where there was a ship that was having some engine trouble, and they had several mechanics come in, work on the engine. They couldn't get it fixed. Finally, they called the most senior engine mechanic in the shipyard, and he came in, evaluated the situation, took out his hammer, hit it on one particular spot on the boiler, and engine started running. A couple weeks later, the ship operators get a bill for $10,000, and they were like, $10,000? You came in here and tapped the hammer. So they asked for a detailed invoice, and he sent one that said, tapping with hammer, $2. Knowing where to tap, 9,998. So I feel like lawyers are going to be that, right? The
Yeah, no,
doing
I like that. That's a great analogy. I love
Yeah,
that. I'm gonna not steal it from you, but if I use it, I'm gonna quote it.
absolutely.
But I think that is how lawyers should be thinking of it.
Yeah.
Instead of the people screaming fire and we're gonna all lose our jobs. And one thing we didn't talk about is all the new roles that this is creating. The engineers, the data people, the strategy people, and the big firms, like great firms, are doing it. White and Case has a whole team that's their strategy team, and they've got people that are data engineers, and they're hiring graduates from undergraduate school that are from MIT and other great schools to help them. And back to your point earlier about the business professionals and the KPMGs, if the law firms start thinking that way, thinking themselves as a business and valuing these extra expertise, maybe we will see some of the things that I'm hoping, and I think you're hoping for.
Yeah, I think that some will, and I think they're going to be the winners, and I think there's going to be a lot who won't, and I don't know what the future looks like there, but yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. I could sit here and chit chat with you all day. So your book, the lawyer upheaval is the older version. You're pointing people towards leader upheaval now, right? And I'm assuming
the red book. Look, I have it right there.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Marketing. I did spend 8 years in marketing before I went to law school.
Oh, nice.
Marketer out of the person.
Well, I'm still digging in, but so far it's been really good. And then your paper on the chief innovation role that's available. I mean, I think I found it through that article, but that's available out in the. I think you sent me a link.
Book, you can go to Amazon. That's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Or the ABA. You can get a big discount if you're an ABA member. If you go to the ABA and buy it. And then the article, if you go to my website, movelaw, MOVELAW.com, and scroll through my writing, it's, goes by date. You can click there and get the full article, because it was originally published in 2 parts. And I think when we first spoke, you'd only had the first part. Yep. So that's probably the best way to get the full article.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's a good read. And I know that it's been a few years now, but I think a lot of these same dynamics are in play. So I found it very valuable. Well, thanks so much for joining. I know I hope to meet you in person, maybe Cam and I, or somewhere else. But I really appreciate you spending a little time with me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.